I received the title of top cop while working at the local police station. I was new to this unit, while all the other officers were seasoned and largely followed their traditions. They were a great group of people, and all tried their best to help me integrate, but still preferred doing things the old way. I often took some case files home and worked on them in my spare time. I also enrolled in a criminology course offered at a state college 40 miles south of us. I applied the new techniques I learned to solve old problems. Fortunately, in my first 6 months, I managed to solve 4 cold cases. This was positive, but the downside was Stella, my wife, had to be away from me 2 nights a week when I went to school. But she is a very considerate wife. She knew what I was learning would bring great benefits in the future. She is a nurse at the local hospital and could rearrange her schedule to maximize the time we could spend together. We both came from middle-class families and had thought carefully about our future. We would buy a house with a small piece of land to garden, keep horses, and maybe some other livestock. We planned to have 2 or 3 children, but this would happen after we spent a few years together, just the 2 of us. It was a great plan, our dream. In short, the 4 cold cases I solved caught the attention of Chief of Police Jim Stevenson. I found myself sitting in his office, listening to an astounding offer. He wanted me to work with his investigation team. Essentially, I would become a detective. The downside was that I had to report to his office at the county center. Instead of commuting 11 miles, I had to travel 27 miles. The upside was a higher salary, and I had my own patrol car to go home every night. I was also allowed to write about the criminology class. Importantly, they said they would pay for the time I spent in class and cover my tuition. Needless to say, as much as I hated leaving all my colleagues and friends at the local police force, the chief had made an offer I couldn't refuse. The atmosphere at the county center can only be described as competitive. No doubt, my rapid promotion had angered at least a few of my colleagues. I tried to keep a low profile, working harder than ever. Most of my time was spent researching unresolved cases. As before, I continued to work on these at home. I would often read everything our office had on a specific case, trying to remember as much as possible. Then, when I had time, or when an idea struck, I would enter it into my evidence application. At the end of the day, I would transfer my thoughts onto a USB drive to take with me to work the next day. It was this habit that led to everything changing. It all started on a sunny Wednesday morning when I couldn't find my USB drive. I searched everywhere, but it was nowhere to be found. I was certain I had left it on my desk, but it wasn't there. Then I realized it might have accidentally been pushed off the desk and into the trash can. The trash can was empty. Then I remembered Stella had taken the white plastic trash bag out last night. She had gone to work, so I had to rummage through the trash can to find the lost USB drive. I began the arduous task of sifting through each item, and finally, deep within 3 layers, I found a white bag inside a black one. Damn, why did she put one bag inside another? Why not just throw the bag on top? The good news was I found my USB drive, but the bad news was there was more. That sunny Wednesday morning, that important day, became one of the darkest days of my life. After putting the USB drive in my pocket, I saw a clear sandwich bag underneath. Inside the sandwich bag, I found 6 small packets, more commonly known as condoms. All of them contained a recognizable white substance. No detective was needed to realize this was a significant piece of evidence. No lab was needed to identify the white substance. It didn't take a trusting husband long to realize that his marriage and life as he knew it might have just ended. I unlocked my police car and placed the condom bag into the evidence fridge. Then I began thinking about my next step. My first instinct was to confront immediately, but Stella could simply deny everything. She might say, for example, that the neighborhood boys might have used our trash can for nefarious purposes. I quickly determined that I needed to use a more reliable method. I needed to use professional surveillance equipment at my house. This would allow me to determine if this was a one-time incident or an ongoing affair. I wasn't even sure if the word fling was appropriate. With 6 full condoms, perhaps the word affair would be more fitting. Installing the right equipment would allow me to determine not just the situation, but possibly the participants involved. I would be able to conduct DNA analysis from the contents of the condoms if necessary. As I was making a to-do list, my phone rang. It was Assistant Chief Jake Robbins, my boss, Chief Stevenson, calling to tell me about a possible breakthrough in one of our cold cases. He said Luke had found Alice Reynolds' car on his property. Chief Stevenson asked me to get there as soon as possible. He said he was assigning me the investigation of this newly opened, now hot, cold case. It was the first time in my 2 years at my new job that I became the lead investigator on a case. I felt honored when the boss chose me to handle such a complex and high-profile case. As I was driving to the farm, my thoughts about the condoms were replaced by memories of the day Luke called me. Unexpectedly, he wanted to discuss the murder of Holly Sherman, one of our unresolved cases. I had arranged to meet him later that day, and the meeting was very productive. He surprised me with his opening statement. He admitted that he had engaged in a romp with Holly Sherman at her house. I had to approach carefully, as sexual activity, though possibly distasteful, is usually not criminal. I asked him if it was consensual. He said she was initially a willing participant, but became less active as the event progressed. He added that this bothered him so much that he eventually confessed everything to his brother, who is the pastor of the local church. His brother advised him to come to me and tell everything. I told him that I appreciated this information, but nothing he admitted was illegal, unless she was coerced into sexual activity against her will. That's when he told me about the other 2 participants, Stephen Barber and Bill Raymore. Both Luke and Bill were there at Stephen's invitation. I found it odd that Stephen, who was supposedly Holly's boyfriend, initiated such an act, but it was not criminal. I needed to delve deeper into the situation, so I asked Luke if he was involved in Holly's poisoning. He said he would never do that. I asked if he suspected the other participants might be involved in her death. He said there was no reason to think so. At that point, I decided this was just an attempt by Luke to clear his conscience, and it wouldn't significantly impact our cold case. So it was an interesting conversation, but it didn't advance our understanding of Holly's death. I had interviewed Stephen, Holly's boyfriend, at the beginning of the case and ruled him out as a suspect. I also realized that, while Luke felt bad about what happened, that didn't make him a suspect. The only thing I had to check was the other participant, Bill Raymore. I made a mental note to check on him the next day. I conducted a thorough check on Mr. Raymore. Apart from some evidence indicating he wasn't a good person, there was nothing to convict him of murder. So I started checking on his wife, Ellie Raymore, and found a lead. Before they moved here a year ago, she worked for a chemical company in the Bay Area. After some phone conversations with managers and directors at the plant where she worked, I had a suspect. She had access to the chemical identified by the coroner as the cause of Holly's death. The managers at the chemical plant indicated that while they were very attentive to products that could be used for recreational purposes, they were less concerned about the toxic byproducts like the one I inquired about. Just 3 days after meeting with Luke, I was part of the team sent to arrest Ellie Raymore. We arrived with a search warrant for her house. She greeted us at the door. When I showed my badge and told her that we were accusing her of killing Holly Sherman, she surprised all of us. "I wonder when these fools would realize it," she smirked. "Just say this, that self-righteous woman got what she deserved." Thanks to Luke Young's visit, we had revived the case. Most of the credit went to me, but in reality, it belonged to Luke. Now I was preparing to talk to Luke again about another unresolved case. This was perhaps the most talked about case we ever had. It involved an older woman named Alice Reynolds and a young man named Jerry Gibson, who disappeared on the same night. She was his teacher in a special program designed to teach young men with developmental delays how to cope with family responsibilities. She taught classes at the house she shared with her husband, Alan. At that time, there were rumors of a student and his teacher disappearing on the same day. Was there a romantic relationship? Had they gone somewhere to be together? Or was it just a bizarre coincidence? These questions had never been answered, and the case was soon closed. Today might mark a new beginning in solving this mystery. It would be great if Luke could contribute to this as he did with Holly Sherman. If so, we should consider adding him to our team. As I drove to Luke's house, the forensics team approached from another direction. Luke came out to meet us. As we shook hands, the forensic team leader asked if it was easy to access the car. Luke pointed out where the car was hidden. Hidden in plain sight, he reminded us that the diverse car dealership he now ran had been in his family for many years. Before the recent expansion, it was a Ford dealership. Over the years, they traded many cars. They sold some used ones and sent others to auctions, but many ended up in a car lot amid their farm. Collectors often came to look at these cars. It was one of these collectors who discovered a nearly new car among all those old ones. He asked about the selling price of the 2-year-old white Buick. Luke went to check. The car was locked, but the license plate was still there. He quickly made a call, asked a question, and appeared disappointed. He had called the chief of police more than once. After hearing Luke's story, we followed him to the car. Just 10 minutes after we arrived, the forensic scientists opened the doors and trunk of the car. They found a few empty drink holders and trays, but there seemed to be little evidence inside the vehicle. No blood or significant findings were present. Most importantly, there were no bodies. I asked Luke to think about a place on the farm where bodies could be hidden. After pondering for a few minutes, his eyes lit up as he remembered an old water well nearby. The forensic scientists soon determined that the water in the well was at least 12 feet deep. They lowered a camera into the well, and the operator observed the images through an optical microscope. After a few minutes of analysis, he turned back and told us, "We have 2 bodies down there." I immediately called the chief to report the news. He congratulated us and said he would call some people. He needed to assemble a team to retrieve the bodies. Hopefully, they would be present by tomorrow. He instructed me to be at the farm at dawn the next day, and the team would report to me as soon as they arrived. I thanked him for his trust. Police tape was wrapped around the well and the car before we left for home. I anticipated a busy day tomorrow, but my thoughts soon returned to the 6 condoms. Since the day's work was completed, I had an extra 2 hours for shopping. On my way home, I stopped at an electronics store and bought 4 smoke detectors equipped with audio and video, identical to the ones already installed in my house. I also acquired a data recording station to record from these devices. I arrived home more than an hour before Stella and had all the devices installed by the time she arrived. I would soon solve the puzzle of the 6 condoms. It could be nothing, or it could be the end of my marriage. When Stella got home, I concealed my worries about the condoms by explaining that I had been assigned as the lead detective in a newly opened case. Stella seemed very interested in everything happening at the farm. I observed her carefully throughout the evening, but didn't notice anything unusual in her behavior. She seemed relaxed, happy, and affectionate. She showed no signs of guilt or remorse. That night, I spent several hours reviewing information related to the case of Alice and Jerry. I think they have a more than average relationship. While going through the case files, I found a note from a school administrator saying Jerry had asked Alice for help with issues related to dating girls. I immediately realized that he had led her into dangerous territory. After thoroughly examining all the evidence in the file, I concluded that Alice and Jerry had more than just a normal relationship. More precisely, it was an extramarital affair for her. She must have known the consequences if it were discovered. I thought this would be a new direction for the case. When bedtime came, I was determined to make love to Stella. I needed to know how she would react to me. It turned out she wasn't very enthusiastic. Her mind seemed to be elsewhere. I'm sure she's pretending. Her actions confirmed my suspicions, but now there were hidden things that would tell the whole story. Looking back, her enthusiasm seemed to have waned over the past month. Until now, I hadn't paid much attention to it. I decided to do it one more time. We hadn't done it twice recently, but I wanted to see if she would refuse me. She didn't refuse, but her involvement in the second round was even less convincing than her first performance. After I finished the second time, I simply stepped out, jumped off the bed, and went straight to the bathroom. When I returned to bed, I turned my back on her. She reached out, but I didn't respond. I spent Thursday observing the team gather, collect the bodies, and transport them to the lab for the identification process. I had a lengthy conversation with the forensic team, and they were certain this was a murder-suicide situation. We discussed this and all other aspects of the matter. Finally, everything came to a close. I got home about an hour late that evening because I had to finish some reports and attend a press briefing before printing. The boss gave me a day off as a reward for solving the case. When I got home that night, I explained to Stella what I had done all day, but I didn't tell her about the extra day off. I planned to take the next day off and use it to address an ongoing case right in my own home. When bedtime came, I tried to pick up where we left off the night before. To my surprise, Stella asked for a rest, saying she wasn't in the mood. This left me pondering. Was she not in the mood because she had been satisfied after a wild morning adventure? Would I find another pack of condoms the next morning after Stella left? I made another trip to the trash can, but this time I didn't find any condoms. Then, I began to review what had happened in our house, namely on Thursday. There was a short recording made by a device in the living room, and a longer one made by a similar device in the guest living room. I sat down to watch my marriage unravel. The video started with the living room scene, and the first thing that caught my attention was Stella opening the door around 1 p.m., letting a couple of men in, kissing them as they entered. I immediately recognized them. They had visited us in the summer. Then she introduced them to me, and we had a comfortable chat. She then took them swooning in my pool. The week I was caught, I had a few cuts on my hand and chest, and some of the wounds were bandaged. I didn't want to wet the bandages or risk infection, so I stayed inside and watched some sports programs on TV. I didn't think much of them, and of course, I didn't suspect any foul play, even though these two men were her cousins. Back to the living room, only a few minutes of chatting had passed when I heard them reminiscing about swooning in my pool, just as I was remembering. Stella recalled that they had carefully hidden themselves in the part of the pool that couldn't be seen from the window. I had a hard time focusing on this detail. Was this thing just starting in my pool, or had they been doing it before? Were they dating when Stella and I got married? Something was off in my head. Anyway, they were 3 consenting adults, except my wife was one of them. Their conversation revealed some more interesting information. The 2 cousins were attending a state university about 50 miles away. After hearing them mention it, I recalled how they talked about it when they came here. Neither of them had classes on Tuesdays or Thursdays. This explained a lot. First, now I understood why Stella suddenly changed her work schedule this fall. She used to work 10 hours a day, from Monday to Thursday. She switched to working 13 hours a day on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Then there were 2 two-hour workdays on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. She said these changes were made by the management, but I suspected they were all her request. She came home at noon on those days, the days her cousins visited. This explained a lot. I thought the living room conversation was bad, until I saw what happened in the guest living room. I'm not sure orgy is a strong enough word to describe what I saw. First, they helped each other undress. Then they started an intense foreplay session on the bed. One of them pulled out a handful of condoms. I was shocked when Stella said, "I have good news for you guys today. I've been on the pill for 10 days now. I'm sure we're all going to enjoy it." One of the cousins remarked that he thought she was trying to get pregnant. She said, "Jake and I are officially trying for a baby, but I've been stalling for obvious reasons. Is Jake okay with this? How can he object if he doesn't know? He would be furious if he knew I was taking the pill. If he finds out, it would lead to some questions I'm not ready to answer. I don't think I can live without what we 3 do, but I also don't want to lose Jake in my marriage. So, what he doesn't know won't hurt him." She continued to complain about how I seemed to notice a difference in her behavior. She mentioned the last time we made love. When we finished, I just went straight to the bathroom. The time we spent after lovemaking had disappeared. She admitted she enjoyed the moments after as much as the act itself. She missed this. She added that she avoided intimacy on Tuesdays and Thursdays, pretending she wasn't in the mood. That was true. Firstly, she was completely satiated, but she also didn't want me to discover something she couldn't hide. She admitted she was clearly uneasy with her rejections of me. She had never refused me before she started her appointments with her cousins. Then she mentioned that recently I didn't even try to start anything. She said that bothered her. There was a lot of sexual activity in this video. They did everything you can't even imagine. I was unfamiliar with being an expert in this kind of behavior, so I couldn't name these variations. When everything was over, her face just radiated pleasure. This disgusted me. There was very little conversation when they engaged in serious sexual intercourse, which to them was just sex, but to me, it was adultery. You might think watching so many videos would be the main point leading to the end of my marriage, and it certainly played a major role, but it was actually the conversation afterwards that sealed the fate of my marriage. Some of the things she said were the final nails in the coffin. After watching the video, I called a divorce lawyer. I managed to get an appointment for Monday afternoon. Throughout the weekend, I avoided Stella in every possible way. She tried to make me sexually interested in her, but I refused. No kisses, no hugs, no private conversations. I had stopped trying to salvage a failing marriage. Finally, she decided to confront the issue, saying these 5 suggestive words: "Honey, we need to talk." I was ready. She started by saying she knew something was wrong. I never kissed her anymore, let alone made love. What had I done? I seemed to feel guilty about something. I replied, I feel guilty for pushing her away from me, but how can I feel guilty if I don't know what I'm guilty of? She countered, then think about everything you've done. Say, in the past few months, if you can identify something that might have upset me, we'll talk about it. If you can't think of such a thing, then surely it's my fault. Answer this question. Jake, is there something bothering you? Did I say something? Did Stella say something that makes you think there's something bothering you? No, but it's what you didn't say, and your actions that tell me something is wrong. She sobbed. Oh Lord, woman, you just admitted that you said nothing to indicate something was wrong. You asked her to dig into her thoughts to see what she might have done to upset you, but she couldn't think of anything. To me, it seems like we're in some kind of crazy standoff. I said these words. I left the room, and she continued to cry. We simply coexisted in the same house until we went to work on Monday. That day, I took an extended lunch to talk to my lawyer. I brought the video and my evidence with me. After watching the video, he said it was clear-cut. Our state law allows filing for adultery, and the video proved the adultery beyond doubt. He mentioned that he had taken the condoms from my evidence fridge and sent them for testing. This would provide additional evidence for us. He pointed out that the settlement would be straightforward. He said the documents would be ready by Wednesday. We decided I would personally deliver the papers to her at home. Despite hating what she had done, I didn't want to embarrass her at her workplace. I thanked him and left. I should perhaps be happy to be rid of this woman, but I felt nothing of the sort. I felt betrayed, confused. I loved Stella with all my heart, but I could never forget the words she said in that video. When I returned home on Monday evening, Stella looked very anxious. She apologized for not preparing anything for dinner. I just picked up the phone and ordered pizza. She said, "Honey, I'm sorry. I'm really confused. I hardly worked today. I'm really tired. Please forgive me for everything I've done to bother you. We've talked about this, Stella. As I recall, you couldn't think of anything that bothered me, and you didn't remember me complaining about anything. I think there's nothing to discuss. But Jake, you're treating me like a stranger. Please tell me why. How have you treated me so badly? You don't touch me anymore, as if you don't love me, and don't want to make love to me. I have a different impression, Stella. I remember trying and being rejected when you said you weren't in the mood. This happened last Tuesday, the Thursday before that, and the Tuesday before that. Maybe you can't stand those 5-hour workdays. I expected you to be rested and eager for lovemaking. But what do I see? The only thing I know is you never told me you weren't in the mood throughout our marriage, until you started working 5 hours a day. Now let's move on to your 10-hour workdays. You allow me to make love to you, but you're somewhere else. Everything is one-sided, as if you're fulfilling an obligation, rather than participating in a noble act of love. I no longer wanted either of those things, so I just avoided them. I didn't want to risk you hurting and humiliating me. What are you saying, Jake? Are you fed up with our marriage? Are you tired of me? Are you going to abandon me? It all depends on you, Stella. Everything depends on you. How can I do anything if you don't give me a chance? You treat me like a roommate, not like a wife. She started to cry. I turned away, walked to my chair, and began watching a news program on PBS. She sat in her chair and watched it with me. Her phone rang. She said, "Honey, I need to answer this call." She went into the bedroom and closed the door. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I knew everything was being recorded by my modified smoke detectors. I connected to the base station with my laptop, put on headphones, and began listening to her conversation in real time. She was talking to her cousins. They confirmed that both could hear her and no one else was there. She said, "I have to cancel today. Jake is acting very strange. I don't know what he knows, but he knows something." "Are you sure he knows? Maybe he's just suspicious. It doesn't matter anymore. He's cut off all ties with me. We're just roommates now, not husband and wife. He doesn't touch me anymore. I need to change this. Okay, we won't meet tomorrow. Maybe things will be better by Thursday." You don't understand what I'm saying. I'm not just canceling tomorrow. I'm canceling everything. I know I can't do this, Stella. I've said it myself. Now I live in two different worlds. I need both. I thought so, but one of those worlds is collapsing, and I need to rebuild it. This is what I have to do. Everything else is replaceable, but not my marriage. Don't come tomorrow or any other time unless I call first. You can visit me anytime, but only in Jake's presence. I must admit she seemed like she was trying to hold herself back, but sometimes it's too late to do the right thing. Yes, it's too late. When I returned from lunch on Tuesday, I received a call from Stella. She told me she wouldn't be coming home early on Tuesdays and Thursdays anymore. She told her manager that the new schedule didn't suit her, so he changed it back to 14 hours a day, from Monday to Thursday. She just wanted me to know not to expect her at home when I arrived. I said, "You told me it was the management's request for this change. I'm surprised they changed it back so quickly at your request, especially so swiftly." "I'm surprised too," she replied. I thought maybe they understood I was very confused, but they weren't. They said they had been thinking of bringing everything back to normal for a long time. My request just expedited the process. I was glad that things were okay, and thanked her for letting me know. After we hung up, I began to suspect that this might be a smokescreen to move their affair to another location. Maybe last night's call was a facade too. I knew what to do. I called her office. She answered after 2 rings. I heard Mary and June talking in the background. She was at the company, just as she had said. I quickly regained composure and said, "Oh, I forgot to ask. Do you want me to pick up anything for dinner tonight?" "That would be great. Thank you for thinking of it." "No problem. See you later." It seemed like her lies had become truths, just like the song says. On my way home, passing by Marcy's gift shop, I noticed a beautiful sign in the window with the words, "Avoid even the appearance of impropriety." I slowed down to take a closer look. Marcy herself came over to serve me, probably because I looked healthy. Clearly, she had read my card when she said, "There's a story behind this product, Sergeant Robbins." I told her I liked it for my boss, Chief Stevenson, who often emphasized this point in our meetings. I said it would be good to have it in our meeting room. Marcy mentioned that the woman who sold her these signs had bought them from her just a few weeks before and was now selling them with tears in her eyes. Here's what Marcy told me. The woman selling the signs, named Janet, was happily married to Brad. She met Steve at a conference organized by her company. Steve was an Army captain. It turned out they worked together on a project related to the conference. As the project progressed, they became good friends. They had lunch together every day. When Brad saw them having lunch at the Hilton, he warned her to stop meeting Steve outside of work. She did not heed this warning. In fact, they continued not only to have dinner, but also went on a few picnics together. Soon their relationship became like a romantic affair. After the conference ended and Steve left, Brad was still angry. He started a confrontation involving their children. Janet swore that their relationship never became physical, and she did not commit adultery. She didn't know that Brad had hired a private detective. Brad realized that at the very least, Janet had an emotional affair. It was likely an extramarital affair. Anyway, Brad couldn't trust her anymore. This eventually led Brad to agree to work abroad for his company for a month. He planned to use this month to think about Janet and their marriage. He needed time alone to digest what he knew and decide on a suitable course of action. Fortunately, their children were all in college. They might be sad if his decision led to a divorce, but they would understand. While Brad was away, Janet happened to walk by a gift shop and saw 4 signs with a very appropriate message. Avoid even the appearance of impropriety. Deep down, she admitted to herself that although she didn't have a physical connection, she might have had an emotional one. If she had followed this advice, she might have avoided a similar issue in the future. She bought all 4 signs and placed them strategically around the house. One hung on the wall at the foot of her bed, the first thing she saw every morning and the last thing every night. Unfortunately, these signs never became useful. She received a call from Brad a few days before he was due to return home. The call was nothing like she expected. Brad's first words to her were, "What are you doing? While I'm trying to salvage our marriage, you continue your affair." She said, "What are you talking about? I haven't been in touch with Steve since he left. He had to go to Europe. He's already there. A long-distance affair, Brad." There was no romance before, and certainly none now, she sobbed. He replied, "Janet, I may have been born at night, but not last night. I decided to check up on your captain before making a final decision about you. I'm surrounded by military personnel here, and I know a few influential officers. I asked a question, and they answered. Your captain didn't go to Europe. He went to Fort Hood, about an hour from our house. How often does he visit you? How many times have you visited him?" She wanted to tell him she didn't believe what he was saying, that she never met Steve, nor did Steve ever visit her, but Brad raised his voice and dominated the conversation. He didn't let her interrupt. He said, "Janet, I've accepted a full-time job here. I filed for divorce. I'm asking for an equal division of our assets, except for your car and house. You can have them right now. I don't think you could get a better deal than this. Go to your captain and celebrate tonight. Sign the papers when they arrive." With these words, he hung up. After crying for a long time, she called the personnel department at Fort Hood. Brad was right. Captain Steve Snow was indeed there, and he had been there for a few weeks. Soon after, she was on her way to see Steve. She returned to the gift shop and sold back all 4 signs. It was the only thing she could do, but her eyes were still filled with tears. This marked the end of something good that she couldn't protect. On the official day of her divorce, Steve's ring replaced Brad's on her finger. It was a farewell to Brad, a welcome to Steve. She had firmly waited until her marriage ended. Now that Brad was officially out of her life, she was frustrated that he didn't believe her. Tonight she could have been in bed with him, instead of Steve. It was Brad's decision, and he made it without giving her a chance. She didn't need a sign to remind her of the fragility of marriage. She would never forget it. She had accepted it, and would do everything necessary to protect her second chance with a stable union. As she finished the story, I thought Marcy would cry. I asked her if there was a story behind all her products. She said maybe, but she didn't know most of them. I picked one of the signs and handed her my credit card, saying, "I'll take this one, Marcy. It's perfect for our meeting room." She pushed my hand away, saying, "Your money is no good here, Sergeant." I shook my head, saying, "I don't want to start by violating the message written on this sign." "I'll pay for it, Marcy." She reluctantly accepted my card. When I got home, I hung the sign where everyone could see it right as they stepped through the front door. Stella would be home in about an hour. While waiting, I connected my computer to the large TV screen in the office. It was time to shine light on the darkness in our marriage. It was time to pull the plug. But first, she needed to know what she was missing. When she came home, she saw my patrol car in the driveway. Hurrying through the door, she said, "Honey, you're home early." She stared at the sign, seemingly frozen in place. Worry was evident on her face as she pointed at the sign and asked, "Did you buy this for me?" I told her it was my boss's favorite saying. I said it applied to me, and yes, it also applied to her. Then I asked, "Would you like to go out for dinner somewhere tonight?" She said, "That would be lovely." She just wanted to change out of her work clothes. She asked where we were going, but I told her it was a surprise. I knew this would be our last evening together. I had made a reservation at a steakhouse where I had proposed to her. It was a surprise, a good surprise, but not the last one I would have for her tonight. Yes, she was surprised and delighted. We talked about the significance of this place in our past. It rekindled memories of many meaningful things for us. As the conversation went on, I found it hard to keep a good mood. I knew everything was about to end, but she didn't. She seemed to sense a change in me and began to get anxious. By the time we got home, she looked scared. When we got home, I suggested watching a movie in the living room. This seemed to ease her anxiety a bit. She popped corn in the oven while I chose the film. We sat together on the two-seater sofa. My computer started projecting the video onto the large TV screen. In the first scene, the three of them were talking on the bed, all nude. She told them that things had been better since they stopped using condoms. My gaze shifted from the video to her. She looked shocked, repeatedly muttering, "Oh God, no, no, not this. Turn it off. Honey, please stop." I had edited pauses at certain points in the video. I decided to skip the foreplay part, the empty sexual acts, and go straight to the beginning of the intercourse. Just then, she rushed to the TV and pulled the plug from the socket. "I know it looks bad, but it's not bad for you or our marriage. This isn't adultery. Adultery destroys because the adulterer becomes distant from their spouse. I don't love my cousins. I'm sure deep down you know there's no risk I'll leave you for them. No matter how bad you think it is, it's just sex, nowhere close to love. I'm sure you understand this doesn't threaten what we have. I love you more than ever. I've still been your wife in every way while this was happening." I shouted, "Really? So those times you told me you weren't in the mood, you never did that until this thing with your cousins started." "I did it out of respect for you, my love. It was just a physical need. There were no emotions involved. Are you trying to convince me that the orgies you organized didn't harm our marriage? Even if I ignore your actions, I cannot ignore your words. It's what you said next that marked the end for us. You don't think sex is an important part of our marriage. Of course, Jake, I know it's an important part of marriage. You've always been a wonderful lover, honey." I told her that I knew she was talking nonsense. I replayed the video and fast-forwarded to the last part, the conversation near the end of the video. Stella said, "You guys have bored me so much, Jake. After what we did, he's so boring. He doesn't interest me anymore. I don't even feel excited when I'm with him. I have to pretend in front of him to make him happy. When I'm in bed with him, I just try to finish as quickly as possible. Poor Jake. I think he understands that not everything is okay. Last time we were together, after my first fake climax, he wanted to go again. I faked it again. I think I need to be a better actress. Otherwise, I might lose Jake. I can't let that happen. Her cousins asked if I would be interested in joining them. She said, I've told you guys this many times. My husband doesn't like weird stuff. He would never agree to what I'm doing, let alone participate in this. He must never know about us. Once he finds out, our marriage would probably end. I turned to Stella and said, you knew my feelings about unconventional sexual acts, yet you still engaged in them without any regard for me. Our sexual life has always been an important part of our marriage. And now you say that your unconventional, strange, and unusual acts have blurred and destroyed your enjoyment of sex with me. The mundane sex we share can't meet your new expectations. How do you think I can stay in this marriage knowing how you feel about our sex life? In the future, every time you agree to have sex with me, I'll be thinking about what you've said. Those words will never leave my mind. Don't worry, you don't need to pretend with me anymore. You don't have to. With these words, I opened my briefcase and handed her an envelope containing the divorce papers. You've been served. This is an equal division document, including everything we've accumulated together. However, you should hire a lawyer to protect your interests. From now on, discussions should be held between lawyers. Movers had taken all my belongings while we were having our last dinner, so the barrier named Jake had now vanished from her life. I would no longer stand in the way of her and her lovers. I would not disappoint her with a mundane farewell kiss. Enjoy your sexual freedom with whoever you want. Goodbye, Stella. As I walked towards the door, she ran and clung to me from behind. She sobbed. I didn't mean it when I said sex with you was dull or mundane. I've stopped what I was doing. It's over now, honey. It won't happen again. I continued walking towards my car, dragging her along the sidewalk. She wouldn't let go of me. Our neighbor, Sally, came over and asked what was happening. Stella began telling her that we were going through tough times. While they were talking, I seized the opportunity to run to my car and drive away. I saw her in the rearview mirror. She ran after my car, waving. I turned the corner, and she disappeared from my view and my life. Stella tried to contact me twice. One day, she came to my door and said she had ideas on how we could get back together. I said, "Don't waste your time anymore, Stella." She left in tears. Our next encounter happened after the official completion of the divorce. I was in my patrol car stopped at a red light, and she pulled up in the lane next to me. When she realized it was me, she waved. I turned away. As traffic started moving, she accelerated and crossed the intersection while the light was still red. I should have pulled her over and cited her for the violation. The police officer in me wanted to do that, but the ex-husband in me didn't want to be forced to talk to her. The ex-husband won. It was the 1-year anniversary of our final divorce. Kelly and I were sitting by the fireplace, eating popcorn and watching a movie on Netflix. She is a social worker. We had met several times in our professional capacities. We met at a holiday party for the underprivileged. After we had finished serving meals to the needy, we, along with other volunteers, sat down for our own meal. Since we were working together, we decided to eat together. The conversation was easy and enjoyable, and we found out we had a lot in common. This conversation led to dating, and dating led to love. We are now in an exclusive relationship. After the movie ended, there was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole and saw a postal worker with an envelope. I assumed it was work-related documents. After signing for it, I realized it was a letter from Stella. I opened it and began to read. "Jake, I want to say for the last time that I am deeply sorry for destroying our marriage. When you left, I told you I had ended things with my cousins, and that was true. After you left, I was in deep shock. I plunged into despair. I knew I had to pull myself together. My escape from this state was to call them and say I was ready to pick up where we left off. They told me they had made arrangements with a girl named Frida. Then, to my surprise, they said she would be delighted if I joined them. They described her as a bisexual girl. Feeling bewildered, they told me she often switched between the two hemispheres. I finally understood. I told them I had never thought about having sex with other women. I thought for a few minutes before saying, "Okay, I'm willing to try anything." Not long after that, our group consisted of 4 guys and 2 girls. We had a long season and played every game imaginable. I became a switch. I tried both sides of the board and enjoyed both. After selling the house and moving into an apartment, I began to realize how much I had lost when you left. I said, "Don't waste your time anymore, Stella." She left in tears. Our next meeting happened after the official divorce was finalized. I was in my patrol car at a red light, and she pulled up in a lane beside me. When she recognized it was me, she waved. I looked away. As the traffic started moving, she accelerated and ran the red light. I should have stopped her and issued a violation. The police officer in me wanted to, but the ex-husband in me didn't want to engage in conversation with her. The ex-husband won. It was the anniversary of our final divorce. Kelly and I were sitting by the fireplace, eating popcorn and watching a movie on Netflix. She's a social worker. We had met several times professionally. We met at a charity dinner for the underprivileged. After serving meals to the needy, we and other volunteers sat down for our meal. Since we worked together, we decided to eat together. The conversation was pleasant, and we discovered many commonalities. This led to dating, then to love. We are now in an exclusive relationship. After the movie, there was a knock on the door. Through the peephole, I saw a postal worker with an envelope. Assuming it was work-related, I signed for it. It turned out to be a letter from Stella. I opened it and began to read. "Jake, for the last time, I want to say I'm sorry for ruining our marriage. When you left, I told you I had ended things with my cousins, and it was true. After you left, I was in shock. I spiraled into despair. I knew I had to wake up. My escape was to call them and say I was ready to pick up where we left off. They told me they had an arrangement with a girl named Frida. Then they surprised me, saying she would be happy if I joined. They said she was bisexual. Confused, they told me she often switched between hemispheres. I finally understood. I told them I had never thought of having sex with other women. I thought for a few minutes before saying, "Okay, I'll try anything." Soon, our group was 4 guys and 2 girls. We had a long season and played every imaginable game. I became a switch. I tried both sides and loved both. After selling the house and moving into an apartment, I realized how much I had lost when you left. I convinced myself that you would eventually come through that door. When I moved into the apartment, I knew you would never come back. I lost interest in the team. I began to see it for what it really was, deep depravity. Eventually, I left the team. Actually, I was fired for not fulfilling duties. Either way, it ended. Who knows, if I had paid more attention in English class, I could have written a book, or at least an article, about what I learned. First, the old adage about nipping things in the bud is true. I should have stopped this from the beginning. I never should have allowed such depravity in our pool. Before, I was completely satisfied with our sex life. Everything changed in a few minutes in our pool. A delusion was born. It took over my consciousness, and it consumed me. Really, at that moment, my downfall became inevitable. I needed more, and when I had more, it was never enough. I lied to you when I said I meant nothing by what I said to my cousins, the words that upset you so much. I'm ashamed to admit, but what I said to them was the unvarnished truth. I meant every word you hated. I had descended into hell, and there was no turning back. My marriage was broken. My life was over. I would never be a wife again. I would never have children to love. No child would ever call me mom. All of this was gone. No turning back. The only way out was never to have gone in. There's another old adage that applies to us, but it's wrong. They say actions speak louder than words. That's nonsense. It wasn't what I did, but what I said that irreparably broke our marriage. Those words, etched in your mind, sealed my fate. We can't go back to normal as long as those words stand between us. Words matter. I'm leaving everything, good and bad, behind. I will never step foot in your house again. If I could go back and change everything, I would do it in a heartbeat. But that doesn't happen in life. I wish you all the best. I hope if you ever think of me, you only remember the good moments. We had everything, Jake, until I destroyed it all. In the process, I destroyed myself. Finally, with newfound gratitude, respect, and yes, enduring love, I bid you farewell forever. Stella. Kelly, reading over my shoulder, became concerned. She turned to me and said, "You know, this is right. This is a suicide letter. You can't let this happen, my love." I took her hand. I had completely left the game and didn't want to go back. As Rhett Butler said, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn."